Hey guys, so as you can tell by the title of this video, we're going to be talking about The Fly from 1958. My name is Kim, and on my channel I have been enjoying doing recap videos lately. As always with my recaps, there are going to be spoilers. If you like these types of videos, please feel free to give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. So this is actually the original The Fly. I feel like whenever I mention this movie, a lot of people think of the one that came out, I believe it was the 80s. I haven't seen that one with, and I believe Jeff Goldblum is in it. If that's wrong, I'll correct myself in text when I edit this. I mainly wanted to watch this for a couple of reasons. One, it's the original, and two, Vincent Price is in it. I think this is my third film that I've talked about on my channel with Vincent Price as one of the main actors in it. Although, interestingly enough, he's not really on screen that much. He's more of a supporting character rather than a main character, which I found interesting. Anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump straight in because y'all are here for a recap. You're not here to listen to me talk about how much I love Vincent Price. So the film is set in Montreal, Canada, and the reason why I'm specifying that is because everyone has French names and I know I'm going to be mispronouncing them, so apologies in advance. I will do my best though. So the first scene is a rather gory discovery of a man whose head and left arm have been crushed by a hydraulic press. We find out this man's name is Andre Delorme. I've probably completely butchered that surname. Thankfully, I can pronounce the name Andre, and we're going to be calling him Andre from now on. But that's the poor man who has been crushed. Andre is a scientist, and it was actually his wife, Helene, who pushed the button on the hydraulic press that killed him. And we find this out pretty much immediately because Helene contacts Andre's brother Francois, played by Vincent Price, and confesses to killing Andre. So the factory where Andre was killed is owned by Francois. So Francois becomes quite a key person in this investigation. The investigation is being led by a man named Inspector Shiraz, and Francois tells him that he finds it interesting that the hydraulic press had come down twice. It had 2 strokes on the meter, thus proving that this wasn't a suicide or anything. So Francois, along with the inspector, they go to Andre and Helene's house. Again, Helene confesses to the inspector that she was the one who pushed the button on the hydraulic press. While she does not know how to operate it, she knows which button makes the press come down. What's interesting is that she does not provide a motive when she is asked why she did it. She simply replies, "I cannot say." And I find it interesting how, she's just confessed to murdering her husband, yet the inspector isn't immediately taking her down to the police station. He's quite happy to let her chill at home. Having said that, she is kind of under house arrest because her doctor finds out what she did, and her doctor knows her very well, and he knows that there must be some kind of explanation, and if there's not, well, she must be insane, and he wants to keep a nurse with her by her side pretty much 24/7 just to monitor, for monitoring reasons. So maybe that's why the inspector doesn't feel the need to take her down to the station straight away. So another thing that the doctor is concerned about is Helene's obsession with flies. We see Francois have dinner with Helene and Andre's son, Philippe, who's just a little boy. And Philippe says that Helene is obsessed with finding a fly with a white head and a white leg. And Philippe is just, mentioning that he knows the fly that she's talking about and he's seen it. And Francois is just completely baffled by this. Like, he thinks it's a rather random thing that she's obsessed with finding this fly. After he has dinner with Philippe, he wanders into his study and he hears a fly, and that gives him an idea. He decides to visit Helene, and he claims that he saw the fly with the white head and the white leg in his study. But he says this in the hopes that it will encourage her to tell him everything that happened, why she did what she did. and it does. She also asks for Inspector Shiras to witness her tell the story because she said that she doesn't want to tell it twice. So Aline starts telling Francois and the inspector what happened, and then a flashback sequence starts. We see Andre, Helene, and Philippe. They just look like this beautiful, happy young family. They've recently got a new cat, a new family cat, which Philippe adores. Andre is really excited about the project he's working on, and he invites Helene to come down to his lab in the basement and check it out. I'm going to look down, check my notes here. So what Andre has invented is a matter transporter device, which he calls a disintegrator integrator. So basically what it is that it transports atoms from one chamber to another. And the way it works is that you put an object into one chamber, you press a button, it transports it to the other chamber. And the reason why he wanted to invent something like this was so you could transport food and supplies to a country or location where they need it, and it would mean that they would get it instantly like that. It also negates the need for cars and planes. It could change transport as we know it. Like most scientists, he decides to start off small. He starts with a plate and then a newspaper, and then he decides to move on to living things. And by living things, I mean the beloved family cat. You know, as a cat lover, which really disappointed me because later on he uses a guinea pig. I was like, why didn't you use a guinea pig at the start? You're going to use the beloved family cat as your first living attempt. Okay, great. Great parenting, mate. Take away the cat that your son is bonding to. So the cat disappears from chamber 1, however, it does not appear in chamber 2. Like nothing appears, it just vanishes. However, the cat can be heard meowing, so it's like the cat's trapped in the 4th dimension or something. Poor kitty, but at least it was meowing, so maybe it was somehow alive in some way still. So after tinkering with his invention a little bit more, he successfully transports a guinea pig from chamber 1 to chamber 2. Helene is here to witness it, and Andre says, if we monitor this guinea pig and it's still fine after a month or so, then I think we can confirm that it was a complete success. So a month passes, the guinea pig is happy, healthy, and thriving. And with that, Andre heads back into his lab and he experiments some more. And by experiment some more, I mean he builds a human-sized pair of chambers because he wants to test his theory on it being a teleportation device for humans. One evening, Andre does not come up from his lab, and so Helene heads back upstairs after reading the note that he placed on his door, just saying, I'm working, please don't disturb me. She heads back upstairs and Philippe comes in saying that he's caught a fly, the weirdest looking fly he's ever found. It's got a white head and a white leg. And Helene says, oh, what are you doing bringing flies in here? You better let it go. So Philippe lets it go. Later that night, because, you know, it's getting very late, Andre still hasn't left his lab. Helene's getting concerned. She heads back downstairs and she's knocking on the door. Andre can only communicate via text on his typewriter or via knocking. He doesn't give too much information to Helene apart from just simply saying, you know, something's gone awry and this might sound strange, but I need you to track down a fly with a white head and a white leg. He then explains to her that the reason why he wants her to find it is because he tried transporting himself from chamber 1 to chamber 2, but didn't realize a fly had got caught in the chamber with him. Thus, when he tried to transport, his atoms got mixed up with that of the fly. We then learn that the white head and white leg of the fly is Andre's head and left arm. Andre's head has now been replaced with that of a fly, although he does keep it covered with a cloak so that Helene can't see. However, she does see that his left arm is now like a fly's leg when he accidentally exposes it. So the next day, Helene enlists the help of Philippe and their housemaid to find the fly. They almost succeed in catching it this time. However, sadly, the fly ends up escaping through a crack in the window. Helene has to deliver the sad news that they almost caught the fly but were unsuccessful. So Andre, he has a pre-prepared note for her that says, if you're reading this, it means you're unsuccessful in catching the fly. I've now realized that we're never going to be able to fix this, to reverse this. So therefore, I plan on destroying my invention along with all of my notes, all of my work to do with it. This is something that man was not meant to know, and it's too dangerous. He basically says, I want you to help me destroy everything, including myself. We have to destroy all evidence of this. She reads this and goes back to him saying, you know, like, just give us some extra time. We will find the fly. Please don't lose hope. He writes a message on the typewriter and he's really struggling. We realize that the fly's instincts seem to be taking over and he's struggling to think the way he was before. Helene encourages him to go through the teleporter. Who knows, maybe you don't need the fly. Maybe your atoms will fix themselves if you go through again. So he does. And as he's exiting the second chamber, you know, we realize that, yeah, nothing changed at all. He just teleported, but he still looks the same. He does, in fact, need the fly if he wants any chance of reversing what happened. And as he comes through the second chamber, the cloak that was covering his head falls off and Helene sees his fly head for the first time. She screams and faints. And while she's passed out, Andre destroys both chambers. He destroys the prototype, the small one that he made. He destroys all of his notes. He sets fire to not everything, but he sets fire to his notes. He then leads Helene to Francois's factory where he prepares the hydraulic press and gestures to her which button will bring the press down. Thankfully, this particular scene isn't that graphic, but it's still quite horrible to imagine. But I suppose, you know, when you realize that Andre's mind is going and he's feeling more and more like a fly as time goes on, perhaps he wasn't fully aware of what was happening at the time. I mean, again, this is just a movie. I'm reading way too much into it. So the hydraulic press goes down. It kills Andre. However, Helene notices that as the press was coming down, Andre's arm fell free, the left arm, the fly arm, and, you know, she's been instructed to destroy all evidence. So she raises the press, moves his arm into position and lowers it again. So that's why there was a 2-stroke count on the machine. So that scene brings us to the start of the film when one of Francois's employees found Helene next to the hydraulic press. That was the opening scene of the film. The scene changes back to present day and Francois and Shiraz are, you know, reacting, you know, taking in her story. Shiraz immediately deems Helene as insane. Like, this whole story sounds crazy, and without the chambers, without the notes, because Andre had only told Helene at this point. His invention was still at the testing stages. Nobody else knows about this machine aside from her. Francois, as crazy as the story sounds, the fact that he knows his brother and his sister-in-law both very, very well, he just knows that Helene would not have done this out of insanity. Like, he doesn't believe the whole insanity thing. As crazy as the story is, it does explain a lot. It explains her obsession with flies. And Shiraz simply says, well, I don't see a fly around here with a white head and a white leg, therefore, how can I believe it? So Shiraz makes arrangements to have Helene arrested with the intention of, rather than sending her to prison for the rest of her life, she would be spending the rest of her life in a hospital instead. So just before she's taken away by doctors, Philippe comes running inside, calling out to Francois, saying that he's found the fly. It's trapped in a spider's web in the back garden. Upon hearing this, Francois runs back upstairs, grabs Shiraz, and leads him to the back garden where Philippe said he saw the fly. And sure enough, in a spider's web, they do indeed see a fly with a white head and white leg. I'm not sure if what we as the audience sees is what the characters see, but we can see that it is in fact Andre's head, Andre's arm, and he's even talking. It's the very famous help me scene. That everyone who, even if you haven't seen this film, everybody knows that scene. But sadly, nobody helps Andre. In fact, Shiraz picks up a giant rock and kills both the spider and the fly. So Shiraz is like, yep, okay, I believe it now. And Francois says, well, if you're gonna convict Helene of murder, you've got to convict yourself as well. She killed a man with the head of a fly, you killed a fly with the head of a man. You're both equally guilty. This is actually my very first time wearing black lipstick, so if it ends up all over my teeth or if I've applied it messily, well, you're gonna experience it firsthand alongside with me, I suppose, in some way. The fact of the matter is, no one would ever believe them. There's no evidence of the experiment that Andre was working on, apart from Helene just saying that he was working on an experiment. And Shiraz has gone ahead and destroyed the last bit of evidence there by killing the fly. They work out a way about how they could pass this off as a suicide, that Andre, you know, had enough time to set up the press the button that brings the press down and position himself without the need of anybody else pushing the button for him. I think Francois says something about how the stroke count could be 2 because that was the last setting they had at the end of the day was the same setting that Andre used to kill himself. Does that make sense? So anyway, Shiraz decides not to convict Helene of murder. Some time passes and we see Helene and Philippe playing croquet in the garden. And Philippe asks Francois about his father's death, like what killed his father. And Francois replies that Andre's work is what killed him. His search for the truth is what unfortunately left to him passing away, and that the search for the truth is the most important work in the whole world and the most dangerous. As you can see, I looked down on my phone for that because I thought it was a really interesting quote and a really great way to end the film. So some fun facts about the movie. One thing I found interesting was that Ben Nye was the makeup artist for the film. I'm sure you've probably all heard of Ben Nye Cosmetics. Yes, that is the brand he started around the time he was retiring. Well, not retiring, but he was moving away from makeup artistry for movies. He's done quite a lot of well-known movies. He worked on Planet of the Apes and Gone with the Wind as the makeup artist. Ben Nye would go on to say that he never worked on anything as sophisticated or original as The Fly. Another thing I read, and I actually heard this listening to a podcast about the film as well, is that during the infamous "Help me" scene, for whatever reason, perhaps to ensure that the actors' reactions to seeing The Fly were genuine or whatever the case may be, they actually had someone on set actually saying the words help me," and in a tiny high-pitched voice as well. And it would just make the actors laugh so much they had to do that scene about 20 times before they got it right. Another more personal fact about this film is that, so I watched this film for the first time in 2020, and when I told my mom I watched it for the first time, she told me how when she was little, like her and her siblings were watching it. It was on TV. This was probably in the 60s or 70s sometime. They wanted to add to that spooky vibe of the film, so they turned all of the lights off in the house. The movie ends, they turn on the lights again, and there was a massive tarantula just on the wall in the living room when they turn all the lights back on. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have you seen this film? Do you think you will see this film? Have you seen the 80s version with Jeff Goldblum, and what did you think of that one? Maybe, would you like me to do a recap of that? Maybe I can add that to my list. Again, I would greatly appreciate if you could like and subscribe, and I will be talking to you all again next week. Bye guys.